Hey everyone, I welcome you all to this new session on filing of GST returns. Today we will learn about what are the different components of GST. Before proceeding with this topic, let us first quickly recap what we learned in our previous session. So in our previous session, we learned about what is GST and why was it introduced to the Indian taxation system. So basically GST is a destination based value added tax. It allowed a single tax structure across the country. It helped the free movement of goods and eliminated multiple layers of taxes like excise duty, service tax, entry tax, purchase tax, etc. It helped the business houses to focus more on their growth rather than focusing on the compliances. It helped create a unified market across India. It increased transparency and ease of doing business. So if we sum up, GST brought a complete turnaround in the Indian taxation system, especially in the indirect taxation system. So let's proceed with the today's topic, that is type of GST. So basically GST is divided into four parts, that is CGST, SGST, IGST and UTGST. CGST stands for Central Goods and Service Tax. SGST stands for State Goods and Service Tax. IGST Integrated Goods and Service Tax and UTGST Union Territory Goods and Service Tax. The basic purpose of introduction of GST was to build the idea of one nation, one tax. But India being a federal nation, both center and states needed the share of revenue collection. Hence, GST was structured as a dual model where both center and state has equal responsibility and functioning mechanism. In the current scenario, central levies CGST, that is Central Goods and Service Tax, state levies State Goods and Service Tax, Union Territories levy Union Territory Goods and Service Tax. For interstate transactions, center collects the IGST, that is Integrated Goods and Service Tax, which is later on distributed between states and the center. Let's understand each component one by one. Okay, so the first one is Central Goods and Service Tax. CGST is the tax levied by the central government on the intra-state supplies of goods and services, that is, when buyer and seller are in the same state. Intra-state supplies implies movement of goods within the same state, that is, the boundary of state is not crossed. So, CGST is collected by the central government and the rate is usually half of the total GST rate shared with the SGST. Input tax credit can be used only to set off CGST and IGST. Before moving ahead with the components of GST, it is imperative to understand the meaning of interstate supplies and intrastate supplies. Wherever the seller and the buyer are in different states, the transactions refers to interstate supplies. Whereas when the seller and the buyer are in the same state, it implies intrastate supplies. For example, me sitting in Jharkhand executes a sale transaction in the state of Bihar. This implies interstate transaction. Whereas me sitting in Jharkhand executes a sale transaction in Jharkhand only implies intrastate supplies. So the place of supply is the deciding factor as to what we have to charge from the customer, either CGST, SGST or IGST. Okay, so let us understand CGST with an example. Let's say Mr. Ravi, a resident from Bangalore, Karnataka, sells shoes worth rupees 10,000 to a customer who is also residing in Bangalore. In this example, the goods didn't cross the boundaries of the state of Karnataka. Hence, CGST and SGST will be charged. So in this scenario, rupees 1200 is the gross amount of GST which will be shared by the center and the state equally. Hence, rupees 600 will go to the central government and rupees 600 will go to the state government. But there is an exception to this rule. Suppose within a state, the government has notified a particular region as a SEZ. SEZ क्या होता है? SEZ होता है Special Economic Zone. So, when goods are supplied from the normal territory of a state to the SEZ, it will be considered as an export of goods for the purpose of GST. And hence, CGST and SGST will not be charged, rather IGST will be charged in this transaction. Okay, so let's move ahead. State Goods and Service Tax, that is SGST. SGST is levied by the state government on the same intrastate supply. Intrastate supplies means the goods didn't cross the boundary of the state. It is collected by the state where the sale happens, and same rate as CGST, that is 50% will be distributed between state and the center. ITC can be used only against SGST and IGST and not CGST. Let us again take an example. Let's take the same case as the previous one. Sale 10,000 in Bangalore, CGST again 600 rupees, SGST again 600 rupees, and 600 rupees goes to the Karnataka state government. So this dual structure of taxation ensures that both the center and the state government gets equal revenue from the domestic trade. Let's move ahead. Integrated Goods and Service Tax, that is IGST. IGST is levied by the central government on all interstate supplies. That is, when goods cross the boundary of one state, this is an IGST transaction and taxes will be collected under the head IGST. Similarly, if service is provisioned from one state to another, this also attracts IGST. It applies to interstate trade, imports, exports, online transactions, and supply to SEZs, that is Special Economic Zones. The rate of IGST is the sum of CGST and SGST. It is collected by the center and later apportioned to the consuming state. Let us understand IGST with an example. A trader in Gujarat sells machine worth rupees 1 lakh to a dealer in Maharashtra. Rate of GST is 18%. In this transaction, since the machinery is moved from Gujarat and crossed the border of Gujarat to reach Maharashtra, IGST is charged. So in this case, 18,000 goes to the central government initially, which then distributes a portion to Maharashtra since it is the destination of consumption. Similarly, if a company imports goods from USA worth rupees 5 lakh, IGST is paid at the custom that amounts to rupees 90,000. This ensures imports are treated at par with the domestic goods. So, the place of consumption of any goods or service is the deciding factor as to what we have to charge, whether CGST or SGST or IGST or UTGST. Let's move ahead. Union Territory Goods and Service Tax, that is UTGST. Union Territory Goods and Service Tax is similar to SGST but is applicable when the supply is made in a union territory without a legislature. What are the UTGST states? Chandigarh, Lakshadweep, Daman and Diu, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and Ladakh. Although Delhi or Puducherry, which has their own legislature, are also union territories, but SGST is charged instead of UTGST. So let us again understand the UTGST along with an example. A bakery in Port Blair sells cakes worth rupees 2,000. GST rate is 5%. The CGST charged will be 2.5% of 2,000, that is rupees 50, and UTGST is charged instead of SGST at the rate of 2.5%, which comes to rupees 50. Hence, the total GST comes to rupees 100. CGST goes to the center and UTGST goes to the UT administration. Okay, so let us now understand the ITC utilization pattern. CGST tax is levied by the central government on the intra-state supplies, that is within the state supplies. Any credits accumulated under the head CGST can be utilized for the payment of CGST or IGST. Similarly, SGST is levied by the state government on the intrastate sale or provision of services. Credits accumulated under the head SGST can be utilized for the payment of SGST or IGST tax liability. In case of IGST, it is charged by the central government. It applies on interstate sale transaction, imports, exports, and the credits accumulation under this head can be utilized for the payment of IGST, CGST, and SGST tax liabilities. Similarly, UTGST is levied by the Union Territory Administration on intra-UT supply, that is, within the Union Territory supplies. The accumulation of UTGST input tax credits can be utilized for the payment of UTGST and IGST tax liability. One thing is very important to note down here, that IGST accumulated input tax credit must be exhausted before utilizing other heads of input tax credits. Let's recap with a real life scenario. Online order from Amazon in Maharashtra delivered to Delhi. Which tax should be applied? Integrated Goods and Service Tax. A local restaurant bill in Delhi, CGST and SGST. Although Delhi is a union territory, but since it has its legislature, we will charge CGST and SGST. A handicraft shop in Andaman selling a vase, CGST and UTGST. So this brings to the end of today's session. Let us quickly recap हमने क्या पढ़ा. सबसे पहले हमने देखा इंटरस्टेट सप्लाईज एंड इंट्रास्टेट सप्लाईज क्या होता है. इंटरस्टेट सप्लाईज सेलर एंड बायर दोनों अलग अलग स्टेट्स में अवेलेबल हैं. इंट्रास्टेट सप्लाईज सेलर एंड बायर बोथ आर इन द सेम स्टेट. फिर हमने देखा टाइप्स ऑफ जीएसटी, दैट इज सीजीएसटी, एसजीएसटी, आईजीएसटी एंड यूटीजीएसटी. हमने एसईजेड का एग्जाम्पल लिया जहां पे सेम स्टेट में होने के बाद भी आईजीएसटी चार्ज करना पड़ता है. सो दैट्स इट फॉर टुडे. थैंक यू.